The layoff notice was printed on cheap, off-white paper, the kind that felt rough under your fingers. It was a sterile, impersonal document, full of corporate jargon that did little to soften the blow. Michael stared at it for a long time, the words blurring in and out of focus. He read it again and again, as if repetition could somehow change the reality of what it said. It did not. Redundancy, downsizing, effective immediately. He was out. After 15 years of loyal service, 15 years of early mornings, late nights, and missed weekends, he was out. Just like that. He was discarded. The meeting with HR had been brief and perfunctory. A handshake, a forced apology, a cardboard box filled with the meager contents of his desk, a chipped coffee mug, a framed photo of his wife Sarah, and their 2 kids, Emily and Ben, a few dusty awards he'd long forgotten about. And that was it. He was escorted out of the building like a common criminal. The security guard's eyes filled with a mixture of pity and apprehension. He was an embarrassment. He walked home that day, the cardboard box feeling bari in his arms, the city noise a dull roar in his ears. He couldn't bring himself to call Sarah yet. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to tell her that their life, the life they had built together, was about to come crashing down. He was supposed to be the provider. He found her in the kitchen, humming along to the radio as she prepared dinner. The kids were in the living room, engrossed in some cartoon, their laughter a painful reminder of everything he was about to lose, everything he had lost already. "Hey," she said, turning to him with a smile. "How was your day?" The words caught in his throat, a hard, painful lump. He set the box down on the kitchen table, the thud echoing through the small apartment. The sound was deafening. Sarah's smile faded. She looked at the box, then at him, her eyes searching his face. She understood. She knew. "Michael?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened?" He told her. He told her everything. And as he spoke, he watched the color drain from her face, the light in her eyes dimming, replaced by a look of fear and disbelief. He had failed them. The first few weeks were a blur of frantic job searching and mounting bills. Michael applied for everything he could find, from managerial positions similar to his old job to entry-level jobs he was vastly overqualified for. But the rejections piled up, each one a fresh blow to his already battered ego. He was losing hope. Their savings, never substantial to begin with, dwindled rapidly. They started cutting corners, skipping meals, selling their belongings. First the TV, then the furniture, then anything else they could find that might fetch a few dollars. They sold everything they could. The apartment, once filled with warmth and laughter, became a cold, empty shell. The silence was the worst. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on them, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Michael and Sarah tried to shield the kids from the worst of it, to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But children are perceptive. They saw the worry lines etched on their parents' faces, heard the hushed arguments in the middle of the night, felt the growing tension in the air. They felt the change. Emily, their 8-year-old daughter, started having nightmares. She would wake up screaming, clutching her worn-out teddy bear, her small body trembling with fear. Ben, their 6-year-old son, became withdrawn and quiet, his once bright eyes now clouded with a sadness that was far too old for his years. He stopped talking as much. One evening, as they sat down to a dinner of plain rice and beans, a meal that had become distressingly familiar, Emily looked at her plate, her lower lip trembling. "Daddy," she said softly, "are we poor now?" The question, so innocent, so direct, struck Michael like a physical blow. He looked at Sarah, his heart breaking, and saw his own pain reflected in her eyes. She looked defeated. "No, honey," he said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "We're just going through a bit of a rough patch. Things will get better." But even as he said the words, he knew they were a lie. He didn't know if things would get better. He didn't know if he could fix this. He was losing hope. The rough patch turned into a chasm. They were evicted from their apartment, their few remaining possessions packed into garbage bags and stored in a friend's garage. They moved into a cramped one-room apartment in a run-down building in a part of the city they had always avoided. The walls were paper-thin. The air hung thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and despair, and the sounds of the city, the sirens, the shouting, the constant underlying hum of desperation, seeped through the cracks, a constant reminder of their precarious existence. It was a dangerous neighborhood. Michael continued to search for work, but the rejections had become routine, each one chipping away at his confidence, his self-worth. He started to lose hope, the light inside him dimming with each passing day. He felt worthless. He saw the pity in people's eyes, the subtle recoil when he told them he was unemployed, the way they avoided his gaze on the street. He felt like a ghost, an invisible man, a burden on a society that had no place for him. He was being erased. The isolation was the worst. Friends, initially sympathetic, gradually drifted away, their offers of help drying up, their calls and messages becoming less frequent, until they stopped altogether. He was alone. He was a stain on their perfect lives, a reminder of the precariousness of their own comfort, a reality they preferred to ignore. He was a reminder of what they could become. One cold evening, huddled with his family on a thin mattress in their tiny, unheated room, Michael looked at his children's faces, their eyes wide and hollow with hunger, their bodies thin and frail. He looked at Sarah, her face etched with worry and exhaustion, her spirit slowly breaking under the strain. He saw the toll it was taking on them. He felt a tear roll down his cheek, followed by another and another. He had failed them. He had failed his family. He had failed himself. He was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss of poverty, and he didn't know if he had the strength to swim back up. He was losing the will to fight. He was starting to feel something else too, something cold and dark that settled in his bones, a presence that seemed to feed on his despair, on his hunger, on his hopelessness. It whispered to him in the silence, in the shadows, in the empty spaces between his thoughts. It told him he was worthless. It told him he was a failure. It told him he would never escape. And it was starting to feel like it might be right. It was always there,